Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Mindset-Conquest Podcast, where every week I'll be joined by a special guest who will be sharing what they've experienced as the biggest failure in their life, but most importantly, the lessons that they've learned from that experience. I'll be spending time with people that I've met throughout my life's journey in business, music, and sport. And the goal is to provide listeners like yourselves with the motivation needed to get through all of life's challenges and learn not to be afraid of failure, but rather to embrace it. Please like and subscribe and enjoy this episode. I'm Chris Atwell. On today's episode, I'm joined by Jonathon Cote. John has a diverse background in telecommunications and transportation, where he's been working as a professional sales rep for almost 20 years. He grew up in North Bay, Ontario, playing football, and he was a boxer. But now he lives in Edmonton, Alberta, where he lives with his wife, Diane. He's currently the president of his curling club, and he's working on an exciting project that he calls Cote's Corner, which he plans to release on YouTube in the very near future. Welcome to the Mindset-Conquest Podcast. I've got a very special guest with me today, Jonathon Cote, all the way from Edmonton, Alberta. Jonathon, how are you?
I'm doing great, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. You and I go way back. You know, we met well over 10 years ago, working in logistics sales roles. We've gotten to know each other well over the years. I just want to say thank you for joining me for this podcast, and I'm looking very forward to chatting with you. Why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself? Let our listeners know, who you are, where you're from, and what do you do for a living?
All right. Everybody's favorite topic, so I could sit here and spend the entire half hour talking about myself. So as Chris mentioned, my name is Jonathon, originally from a small town in northern Ontario called North Bay on the Trans-Canada Highway, home of one of two NORAD monitoring stations in North America, the whole coming out of Trout Lake. Gorgeous place, lots of hunting, fishing, lakes. So my heart, although I'm a born-again Albertan, my heart still resides in the 705.
I would argue that a lot of people from North Bay and a lot of people from Edmonton are probably quite similar, though. So, yeah.
I think we're very similar on the parallel, and we're very similar in regards to personalities, hobbies, approachability, and business style. So it's a pretty easy transition. So outside of that, a little bit more about myself. Later in life, obviously now I seem to fill my time with hobbies. My wife and I have no children, so we've got all kinds of free time on our hands. Volunteer with my community league, volunteer with my curling club. I curl. I take as many hobbies as I possibly can. I'm a aspiring craft brewer. Shouldn't say aspiring because I've made some pretty good beer. Nice. Just don't have the commercial equipment. Aspiring woodworker, and what I would call myself a forever tinkerer. I like to take things apart and find out how they work, and always have to have some project on the go.
You're also into fitness. I know this. You and I used to train a lot back in the days at Gold Gym. Are you still into that?
I am. It's one of those things, as you can appreciate, you get older, you don't have the time you had when you were younger. You've got other commitments in life. You overextend yourself a little bit and realize you have to rein things back in. So fitness has changed for me in terms of what it means. I still love to lift very, very heavy things as much as I can.
Who doesn't?
Safely now, because when we were younger, I might have done some dumb stuff. Nobody needs to shoulder press 90-pound dumbbells, but you do it and you have injuries later on in life. So fitness for me, honestly, just means keeping active, staying healthy, trying to watch what I eat so that I'm not constantly eating junk. But it's not what it used to be, that's for sure.
I see behind you there, you've got a, Manitoulin profile. Why don't you share what that means and what you do for a living to our listeners here?
Sure. So without looking at the back, I'm not going to go through all of that, but I'll explain what I do in terms of a profession. So as Chris alluded to, him and I met many moons ago, early on in our sales careers within the supply chain and logistics industry. I was fortunate enough as I was mentioning to Chris earlier, to drive by a facility out in Atchison that Manitoulin was constructing. It was to be the future home of the 7 or 8 different operating companies they acquired in Alberta. And every day I would drive by this facility and told myself, one day I'm going to work in that building. Interestingly enough, that day came, the first day of COVID. So this is, as you see me now in the facility, it's one of the handful of days that I've been in here in the 2+ years that I've been with the organization. My role is in national accounts. I work with our large strategic and infrastructure customers within the province of Alberta, the oil sands, wholesale distribution. We touch a lot of different industries. I also manage multinationals and U.S. organizations. So I have a handful of U.S. states, Texas, Colorado, Nevada, Louisiana, Utah, probably missing a few others that fall under directly my responsibility.
Awesome. Is there a lot of oil production in Utah?
Not that I'm aware of.
No. So why Utah? Why'd they give you that territory?
I think it was more just aligned with the Midwest.
Okay.
Okay. Just geographically, it's kind of somewhat aligned. Albeit, I'm okay with Utah. I've brought on some large customers from that region that really do buy into what our mantra is, which is being an operationally driven and customer focused organization. So there's some great businesses down in Utah, of all places that I never thought.
Well, you got to love Salt Lake City. I mean, gorgeous city. I've been there a few times, and breathtaking views, high elevation, and some awesome microbreweries too. Because I know you're into beer. Very cool. Very cool. Tell me a little bit more about this beer stuff that you've made. So you said you've made some pretty awesome beers. Elaborate, please.
Oh, it's interesting. So my journey in beer started like most people's does with the kit that's liquid. You add water, pour yeast, and you still find a way to screw it up. It's the easiest way to do it, and you still find a way to make it taste like crap. It's how everybody starts. It's not your recipe, it's not your ingredients, and you don't know how to control temperatures or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I started that way, started making kits. The kits started turning out really, really well. And then I decided to challenge myself and take the next step. Well, next step from a kit is let's start cracking from grain. So I found a recipe online. I started cracking from grain. I used my KitchenAid stand mixer grain mill attachment to crack 12 pounds of grain that took an hour to do.
Okay, how big is this mixer?
It's the stand mixer is about, well, you can't see for context. It's just one of those kitchen mixers, and the grain mill's got a small little hopper.
Right.
So interestingly enough, that took forever, but the beer turned out pretty good, except the fact that I overcarbonated it and it blew up bottles and whatnot. So I've been doing it now for 7 or 8 years, went from bottling to kegging. I'm now exclusively making my own recipes.
Nice.
Some are good, some are not good. I've only ever had to pitch one batch completely. I can't keep it in stock long enough. I now have friends that know I do it and they realize my beer doesn't taste horrible, so they show up with nothing and just enjoy our yard, our barbecue, and drink my beer for free.
Well, I've had a few experiences in your yard there. One thing about living on that parallel that you mentioned earlier is in the summer months, right around Canada Day, mid-July, the sun's out until almost midnight. It doesn't get dark until late, and it gets bright really early. So I think, if I recall, I'm trying to recall because it's hard to, but we accidentally stayed up a little late a few times drinking some beers. So
it's easy to do when the sun doesn't go down.
It's true. At one point, you were raising chickens. Is that still something that you're doing?
Yeah, we still have the chickens. We were part of the. This is an interesting story, and I'll shorten it. My wife has always been interested in raising chickens. It's something she wanted to do. The city of Edmonton's very forward thinking in a lot of the things they do, including sustainable foods, urban projects. So the Sustainable Foods Edmonton ran a pilot project for urban hens. It was a well sought after, high in demand project. It involved drawing out a site plan, planning your coop, following the regulations, and then submitting everything for an application along with a letter from your neighbors, not necessarily endorsing you getting them, just a letter stating that you've notified them. That was all that was required. The morning that the pilot opened, I had all my paperwork together, did all the legwork for my wife, assuming that we were going to get denied and I was never actually going to have to build a chicken coop. So I submitted my paperwork in the morning and heard back a week later that, yeah, we were approved. And then the journey of the most expensive eggs on the planet began. I think I'm still sitting at a cost per egg of about $30. It's not something you do to save money. It's something you do as a hobby to be a good steward of the planet, and a lot of other benefits to raising hens. All of the straw, the bedding, and everything is reused as compost in our garden. We've got a large garden, as you have seen, Chris. So we waste very little. That's one of the main reasons for getting them. And they're also very funny to watch. They're really strange animals. Let's just put it. And they all have personalities, which is strange. So we had 6. We're down to 2. We'll likely get 4 more at another point.
Yeah, definitely sustainable and a good idea around environmental. But when you're paying $30 an egg, it still doesn't match the rate of inflation that we're experiencing today, and that's 6.75% month over month. So very cool. All right, thank you for the intro. I want to ask you a question that I ask every guest that comes onto this podcast, and that's around what you consider to be your biggest failure in your life, whether that's in business or personal, but most importantly, the lessons that you learned from that failure. So I'm curious, John, what do you consider your biggest failure?
Sure. I've given this a lot of thought over recent years, probably more so the last 3 or 4. I'm going to go on the personal side of things, not the business, but there's some parallels between the two. Excuse me. Growing up, my family, my mom and I came from a single parent home. Always felt that we were the outcasts of our family, the black sheep, so to speak. And that's just something, whether it was passed down from my mother to me or a perception that I built up over time, just based on the fact that we were never really around the rest of our family. My aunts, uncles, cousins, a fairly large family. Everyone seeming above the surface, have 2 parents, happy home, everything that you picture is normal, right? Now, growing up, seeing that, being somewhat envious, letting envy get in and being envious of that, and the things that my cousins had that I didn't have, further built that chip on my shoulder. It got quite large, to a point where I somewhat started to share my mom's perceptions and points of view of my family. It wasn't until recently where I started reconnecting with my aunts and uncles. And it's something that I regret. Time is one thing that we can never really get back. You can make up for it, but you're making up for it on borrowed time already. So I regret the years that I didn't take the opportunity to find out for myself what my family was like, to get to know my cousins, my aunts, my uncles. It took family. This is going to sound horrible and like a cliche, but it took family tragedy for that to actually come to the forefront. So it's one of those things. I've reconnected with one of my uncles very, very closely. To this day, he still texts me, and I don't know how he understands how to text, but he does, and he uses emojis. He's a pretty funny guy. Unfortunately, all this started to happen right around COVID, so we haven't been able to get together to get up to the camp to go fishing or even have a beer, whiskey or whatever, and just kind of really air things out. But we've had the last couple of years to do it remotely. The biggest thing I've learned from that is, again, time is something that you can't make up. If you have an opportunity to do something, don't put it off. If you put off an opportunity today, the opportunity may not be there tomorrow, whether it's personal, whether it's business. You really need to stop and look around, look at what's in front of you, and take the chance.
I was speaking with somebody recently about a similar situation where, they were younger. They allowed themselves to be influenced. I'm not saying your mother influenced you, but obviously, the environment you were in created that chip that you had, right? You allowed that chip to get on you, and you make decisions that at the time you think are right, but they impact you in a far greater, how do I put this? A far greater manner, right? Like now this is something now that you regret. What would you have done differently? You were young at the time. Your mother was a single mother. She's doing her best raising you. What would you have done differently looking back?
It's a great question. And it would depend whether or not I was self-aware enough, and as children, we're often not. I would have hoped that I would have had the foresight to raise my hand and ask the question for myself. Hey, I'd love to go spend some time with Uncle Bernie and Aunt Bev, or Uncle Bruce and Aunt Heather. Make the effort. I guess that's the other part of the lesson. You need to make the opportunities for yourself, and you need to take them. Nobody's going to make opportunities for you. Again, whether it's in business or it's personal, on your personal life, you need to make those opportunities. And if you're not making those opportunities, you're going to find yourself later on in life regretting not making them. And to your earlier point, you let chips on your shoulder grow larger than they necessarily need to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes we let, vibes, whether it's positive or negative. Positive vibes are definitely contagious, but so are negative vibes, right? And they take over your mind, and it's hard to get to the other side. That's why I'm a big believer in always thinking positive, always being optimistic, and that overpowers negative thoughts from taking over my mind. Now that you've kind of seen that, what are you doing differently today? I mean, you mentioned, hey, time is finite, but what are you doing to connect with your family?
So again, taking the opportunity to have conversations with my uncle. We keep in touch via text, hoping now that restrictions have lifted, that we'll get an opportunity to connect in person and travel. I'd say on the greater scope of things in my life, given a very small example of taking the opportunity, Chris, but there was a restaurant in Edmonton that I drove by every day for 6 years. Every day for 6 years, I said as I drove by, we should go check that place out. I hear it's really, really good. Never took the opportunity. Thanks to social media, I found out it was closing in 30 days because of a light rail transit expansion. Wow. And I had the opportunity to. So I guess what I'm doing differently these days is when an opportunity presents itself, to whether it's a new restaurant or someone asks, hey, I'm going to do this, are you free? I don't hum and haw. I don't deliberate. I don't make excuses anymore. If I can do it and it isn't going to push anything else off, I take the opportunity, regardless of what it is, because it's an experience. And the thing that I've learned about life is you need to put as many experiences in as you can, because time is finite. And if you sit there wasting your time, you're wasting opportunities.
Absolutely. I think, there are correlations. Business opportunities sometimes are limited time only. Family relationships, I mean, nobody lives forever, right? And you think about your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, your parents, your kids, even your animals to that point. You want to make the best of it while we're all here and healthy and able to do things together or sign those deals, prosper from the opportunity as much as possible. Yeah. So when you were going through, that whole situation and you recognize, hey, it took tragedy. You mentioned it took tragedy for you to change your mind. What resources helped you along the way? Sounds like your wife probably had something to do with it as well.
Interestingly enough, yeah. I've had great friends, coworkers in my community. I've had people around me, and I've had people that have, led by example. This is how you interact with your family. These are opportunities you take. My wife has been a great influence that way. I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't say that she helped me almost completely do a 180 in my life, from flying by the seat of my pants, so to speak, without a plan, just being completely reactive day to day, continually job hopping because I felt like the grass was greener on the other side, and acting not necessarily my age, so there's a lot of maturing that I needed to do. I like to put it this way.
Age is just a number, by the way. We can age is just a number. Yeah. We can have fun.
Oh, we can still have fun for sure, but maturity and responsibility. My wife forced me kicking and screaming into adulting, and I didn't want to do it. But it's opened up a ton of opportunities and something that I needed a little push in the right direction to be able to do. She's been supportive of business ventures, career opportunities, and my biggest champion when it comes to reconnecting with my family or anything that I see as something I want to do to better myself.
Amazing. Who would you consider to be the most influential people in your life? Maybe the top 3.
Sure. So I already mentioned one, my wife, so I'm going to go with another 3. It goes without saying that she's number 1. My grandfather holds probably the top seat in that regard. And I'll start with something he used to tell me all the time: get your hands out of your pockets. He would sit there, tell me to get my hands out of my pockets. My grandfather owned a number of rental properties. He owned an outrigging camp that had a restaurant, 7 cabins. I believe there was 11 or 12 fishing boats, a dock, a full operation, just on the way to Sturgeon Falls across the trestle right there, called the Meadowin. Love that place. I spent so much time out there in the summer and throughout the winter, so to speak. And when I was not quite old enough to get a job, he may have taken advantage of child labor and hired me out there. But I learned some valuable lessons out there.
Get the grandson to work on the boats. Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. Get the grandson to take the Americans out fishing because he knows the lake better than they do. Get him to crawl underneath the building to get rid of the garter snakes and whatnot. So, but one thing that he always said was get your hands out of your pockets, followed by, I'm not paying you if your hands are in your pockets. So I learned very quickly to take initiative, and if I had no immediate task at hand, to go find something to do, because he would watch and I wouldn't get paid if I had my hands in my pockets for 5 minutes. He'd dock my pay.
Wow.
On top of that, he's also one of the most interesting people I've ever met. Unfortunately, he has passed. What he's done in his career, in his life, is the stuff that people write books about. He was many ticketed trades. He had the opportunity to work in the oil sands up in North Slave Lake, Fort McMurray, when things were just getting started up there. Wow. So he was one of the folks helping break ground for the infrastructure that has fueled the economy for so long. The experience he's had, the things he's been able to do, the stories he's told me about things he's done in camp, it just kind of further that, take the opportunities that are there and make the most of them.
Sounds like a great dude.
Yeah, he was this short guy too, like this short little Frenchman that just you wouldn't think that he was that strong, but that guy was tough as nails, and he had that vice grip handshake that not too many people have these days anymore.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember that too. My grandfather was a laborer his whole life, managed a crew that dug all the dredges in the St. Lawrence River. And man, when he shook my hand, it felt like his paw-sized hand was going to crush my fingers. So I can relate. Yeah.
So I guess going to kind of like another group of people, and it's hard to single out one individual in this group. I've had the opportunity, Chris, you and I have worked with some of the same people to have worked for and with some fantastic leaders who didn't necessarily need to spend the time that they did with me to help me develop professionally and personally. We took a keen interest in. There's that group of core mentors who are there with you through your formative years in the beginning of your career. And this is more on the professional side of things that have really that have helped me for lack of a post-secondary education, which is a whole other topic. I had to learn very similarly to yourself, Chris, through the school of somewhat hard knocks. The mistakes that you make that cost you money, that if you look at them the right way, become college lessons, so to speak. But people that have been able to give me that opportunity, put me in front of that, put their faith in me, put their trust in me, and believe in me. So that group there is one that I do a disservice if I didn't say thank you to all the former leaders, all my former coworkers, all my former support people. It takes a whole supporting cast to make anyone successful.
Awesome.
And the last person, and this is going to sound like a plug, is the guy I'm talking to right now. This goes back to our Pure Later days where we first met. I had started there before. Well, technically, I think we started at the same time, but I had started in Edmonton before you had, and Edmonton had made some changes. So there were some new faces around. I was one of the new faces. I thought I had things clocked out. I thought I was full of energy. I thought I was running a gun and let's go make things happen. Then Chris Atwell comes to town and takes what I thought was already high energy and high intensity to a whole other level. So I had to step up my game because you showed up and it felt like you never slept, and I needed sleep and you didn't. I remember continually pushing each other in the competitive nature, which I think helped both of us early on in our careers. The side bets on who'd close most in a quarter. Then there was the argument of you'd close more, but mine was more compliant. So who really closed more? And then there was the semantics of stuff and the constant ribbing, right? Yeah. I've watched you over the years throughout your career, the roles that you've taken and how your career's progressed. And some of the things that you've done are things that I've aspired to. I know business travel is one thing I've never really had an opportunity to do. And for a while, it felt like you were somewhere else differently every week, which can get tiring on people, but is also a lot of fun. And that's something that I, kind of aspire to, that senior level sales position that I was always kind of chasing, that you kind of worked your way up towards through hard work. So watching you through your journey and the conversations we've had over the years has definitely played a big part in helping me get to where I am today. So again, it sounds like a giant plug, but Chris is a sharp guy and he's helped me a lot.
Thank you. That those competitive moments, still, I think about those all the time. I share those stories with my sales team as I watch them compete against each other. And I'm like, you should have seen this time where, I was managing North Edmonton and Jonathon Cote was managing South Edmonton. And every Friday we would post the list of leads up in the pipeline on the projector at the time, because we had a projector. That's how long ago it is, and the banter. So yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. Well, Jonathon, I could talk to you all day. I really appreciate it. It's been a wonderful discussion. The learnings that you pulled from not doing the things, taking opportunities that are in front of you, and actually just acting on them, can be applied in any part of your life, whether that's business, personal, it doesn't matter. We live on a planet that's spinning around faster than we can imagine. We're only here for a certain amount of time. Take advantage of it, make the most of it. And I appreciate you sharing your journey, man. Before we go, where can people connect with you online? You're pretty active on some platforms, aren't you?
Sure. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm going to have to eventually stop procrastinating and actually follow through on take the opportunity as they present themselves. Through COVID, I started just watching negativity on people's Facebook feeds, and it was starting to affect my mood. Social media, Facebook is one way that I communicate with my recently re-engaged, I guess, for lack of a better word, relationships with my family. So it's not a media that I can easily get rid of if I want to continue to pursue that. So I decided to try and make change where I could. I started this. It's not a channel, but I'm likely going to make it a channel. It is going to be a channel, not likely. I need to take the opportunity. So I need to get likely out of my vocabulary, called Cote's Corner. And really what Cote's Corner was just for gags. I had a project for that weekend, and I would take progress pictures of, I'm making beer. So here today on Cote's Corner, we're going to make a lime kolsch. Or today on Cote's Corner, we're going to make pastrami. So I started doing things like that just for my own purposes to try and put something distracting out on Facebook. I had no
something
idea.
Positive, something fun. Yeah.
Exactly. And I had no idea how many people actually were watching or following. I get some people that would comment regularly. And when I went on a bit of a hiatus, just because things were busy and I had no time to do any projects, so there was nothing on Cote's Corner, I'd run into people socially and they'd ask, what's going on with Cote's Corner? I haven't seen anything in a long time. I'm actually getting pushed by people to start, whether it's a YouTube channel, a website, or something, just for some of the things that I've got going on. People seem to have some kind of an interest. So in the very near future, Cote's Corner will be out there, and whether it's, I don't know how to work Instagram. I feel like I'm the old man that's going to say that. So when not on Instagram, you'll likely find a YouTube channel of me trying to figure it out, a website, or whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook. But LinkedIn is probably the place that you can find me posting the most today.
Awesome. I look forward to Cote's Corner on YouTube. I, for one, have the privilege of seeing your posts on Facebook. Keep them coming. It's super interesting. I think your last pastrami post, you had like, how many pounds of meat were there? Like 20 pounds of beef. Look at this. So you're up to some really cool things, man. Again, thank you very much, John. Real pleasure speaking with you. I look forward to connecting with you in person again. And stay in touch, okay?
Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Take care.